Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, depends on where you're dialing in from. Welcome to this webinar on business travel compliance, where we will discuss the secret costs of unmanaged business trips. And we'll do this on the basis of a couple of examples. You cannot speak. Well, you can speak, but we will not be able to hear you. Just checking. There is a chat on the right-hand side that you should be able to use to raise your questions. Maybe someone from the audience can give it a go and do a little bit of a test if it actually works. That would be lovely. Yeah, thank you very much, Doris, Nathanan. Very good. Great to have you here. Very good. All right. So quickly to the agenda. We've got 1 hour today. And as I already said, we're going to talk about business travel compliance, but we're going to mainly discuss 3 real-life examples of business travel compliance gone wrong. The first one is Infosys, who got a $34 million immigration penalty in the US a couple of years ago. Second one is Netflix. Everybody knows Netflix, who got a not so pleasant surprise earlier this year, being hit with a corporate tax bill of $2 million in India because of some business travelers out there. And a third example is Bosch. Also, everybody knows Bosch. They approximately 10 years ago, I think, agreed to pay a 320 million euro settlement to basically make sure no litigation was taking place in India, again regarding business travelers, obviously. In the process, we will talk also about other business travel compliance risks than the specific examples that we will discuss for Infosys, Netflix, and Bosch. And we'll, of course, also talk about, well, how do you then manage or mitigate these risks? So I've been talking about we already for a while. You can see other people on the screen, but you're also there. Maybe really quickly, I've already said it, and you've all found the chat. Yes to all these questions. Ask your questions anytime. We'll try to answer them as good as we can. I'm only human, even worse, I'm male, so I struggle doing 2 things at the same time, but I'll try to keep an eye on the chat and try to also moderate the session. We will share the slide deck afterwards, and the recording of this webinar will also remain available at Demio for, I think, a week or 2. Yes, the penalties were for business trips, indeed. So today we're talking about business trip compliance, but maybe a good point, Jindo, thank you. We can also discuss a little bit how do workations relate to business trips, because there's quite a strong overlap to spoil the surprise a little bit there. All right, now I've been talking about we already for a little bit. So let's do a quick round of introductions because I'm not alone, but let me start with myself. Not so charming, I apologize for this, but I've been speaking already for a while. My name is Pieter Manden, one of the co-founders at WorkFlex, but my background is that I am a tax lawyer, used to work at PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, now for Vialto basically for 13 years, so a long time, both in the Netherlands and in Germany. I'm Dutch, working from my home today in Amsterdam, and my specialism has always been around employer compliance when people temporarily or permanently work from a place different than the office. Well, this is also what we do at WorkFlex. We help employers to compliantly enable workations or compliantly manage business travel. I'm not alone. I've got 2 very experienced, let's say, colleagues with me today who will introduce themselves. Orsolya, can I hand over to you?
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Orsolya Mochlar and I'm head of international careers at Merck Group. And basically, we are responsible, or I am responsible for policy design and benchmarking and the global mobility strategy at Merck. And in the last 2 years, we were basically very much involved in the cross-border remote working policy design, and currently we are also busy with the business traveler topic. So this topic very much speaks to me at the moment. And previously I was working approximately 15 years in consulting in PwC and Deloitte. And after that I moved to the in-house HR side and working within global mobility in HR and in Bosch and also in Enercon and now in Merck. So I'm happy to be here, and also I'm very curious about hear all your questions about business traveler topic.
Yeah, thank you very much, Orsolya. Really great to have you here. You already mentioned it. Remote work from abroad was a very big topic also for you over the past year. And we've already seen a question. What's this now about business travel, about workations? Maybe you can enlighten the audience a little bit on what you consider the overlap, but also the differences between workations or remote work from abroad and business travel.
Yeah, I mean, very shortly, basically how we defined at Merck, the main difference that we defined workation as a privately driven basically opportunity to work abroad, while business travel is like business motivated. It has a clear business reason for going to some project or conferences or meetings abroad. So that is the very, very simplified one sentence summary, I would say.
But spot on, I would say. Yeah, thanks. Clarissa, we can't see you, but I hope you're still there. And if so, I would hand over to you.
Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me at least? I don't know why you cannot see me because my camera is on, but I can see the black box here. But I'm here and I'm also happy to introduce myself, but I couldn't change my camera settings, so it worked before. Not sure what happened, but still happy to continue, of course. And yeah, my name is Clarissa. I'm a business lawyer and I work at BioNTech here in Berlin. We have lovely weather, so I say hello to everyone, this time from Germany's capital. And yeah, I work as a global mobility manager. Our team here at BioNTech is pretty small, so we just have 2 people. It's just me and a colleague. We will soon be a team of 3. And I joined the company in January, so pretty fresh to the company, but not to the global mobility world. Before I joined BioNTech, I was working for SumUp and also for EY. When it comes to my EY work, I was also part of the global mobility team. And we were taking care of internal clients in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And yeah, in the last few years, I was mainly working in regards to assignments, relocations from abroad, remote work policy, of course. We just started the program earlier this month, so we are still pretty excited about our remote work program. Yeah, and we're also taking care of everything that is related to going abroad, also business travel compliance.
Very good. Yeah, great to have you here too, Clarissa. Indeed, do not play around with the settings or so. We've now got a picture here on the screen, and if people want to find out what you look like, they can Google. Audio is perfect. Yeah, very good. Partially thanks to you, basically, we're now slowly but surely out of the pandemic, right? And business travel is back on the rise. But of course, it also kind of raises the question that business travel has been around for so long. Why are you here? Why are we talking about business travel compliance at all? Do you have a view on this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a super interesting question. And I was also thinking about this myself. So I guess, I mean, due to COVID, we know that we had travel bans, entry restrictions. So business trip or also canceling business trips and moving abroad and going on assignment was pretty much in the spotlight. Some of them needed to be canceled. They needed to be postponed. So I guess the discussion that we all had a few years ago makes us aware that this is a topic for almost all companies all over the world. So for me, it's not a real surprise that now we are really focusing on also compliance, even though business travel was always there. But I think it just happened and no one was really checking it. Everything went well before COVID hit the world. And now, yeah, it's a different world now. And we're thinking about alternatives when it comes to working abroad, maybe do it virtually. So I think this topic in general is now really with us and is a priority for many, many companies.
Yeah, thanks very much. Orsolya, you also mentioned business travel compliance is, let's say, back on the agenda at Merck.
Yeah,
Do you have anything to add? Why now?
I fully agree with Clarissa on this, because I also see that one of the trigger is the pandemic. Basically, what I see that after pandemic or during the pandemic, we all learned to work like remotely, and I think then the companies were more like having this sensation of, oh, but this can trigger certain compliance issues. And after the pandemic, when basically we are now starting again these travel activities, and I would say that together with the vacation and the business travels, this is more in the spotlight, that how we should set up these travels in a compliant manner, and what are like the watch outs for the companies which they have to handle, or where they really have to set up certain compliance processes as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. Just before we go to the next slide, I forgot to mention earlier, great to have you here. Of course, you work at Merck and respectively BioNTech, but do want to make clear out here that your views, the views you're sharing, are basically based on your general experience, and they do not represent any statements or opinions of your employer, just to get that on tape. Yeah, perfect. Thanks very much. I fully agree, by the way, why business travel is on the agenda now. The pandemic showed so clearly that you need to worry about the people that you've got working for you abroad. I also think there's two other trends. You see more and more alignment between authorities internationally. So the chance of being caught, which is always important when we're talking about risks, right? I think is significantly increasing. Plus also, at least before the pandemic, I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers. We tried technologies. We've seen technologies in the market. It is always shown rather difficult to get a technology in place that is affordable for clients and also efficiently working for the clients, the employers themselves, because obviously nobody's really enthusiastic about business travel compliance. It's a must-have, but it's not a nice-to-have. Nobody wants to spend time on it, so it has to be super efficient. And I think now we're more in an age that technology will actually allow us to get a solution in place and processes in place that you can still ensure compliance without having to bother too many people within the company. But that's just my opinion. I also have my views. All right, so quick introduction and summary of the various risks before we dive into the three examples of Infosys, Netflix, and Bosch. What are we actually talking about when we talk about business travel compliance? You can see what I call the risk dimensions on screen here. We can discuss whether some of them should be bundled, maybe there should be an additional one, data security. But in general, I think there's a consensus in the market that these are the topics that are usually the most relevant. So we've got corporate tax, the business traveler working for a PE abroad, or maybe even constituting one. PE is permanent establishment, by the way. Employment tax, the business traveler having to be included on the local payroll, or maybe even driving the obligation to register locally as an employer. So it's basically wage tax. Social security, the risk that the employee or the business traveler drops out of its home country social security scheme or becomes mandatory covered in the destination country. Labor law, usually the risk that the business traveler would start and fall under the labor law requirements of the destination country, which within the EU, for instance, is usually not a big danger. But if you're talking other countries outside of the EU, there are very significant differences between labor law regulations, like different types of leaves or something like this, and termination law also. Visa migration, pretty fundamental. The risk that the business traveler, A, is not even allowed to enter the destination country, and B, is not allowed to work from there. And the last one, PWD notifications. PWD stands for Posted Worker Directive. It's an EU regulation. People would usually say it's part of labor law. Basically, what it requires is employers to register business travelers to particular countries with the authorities in those countries upfront to basically ensure that the local authorities can do their checks. And what would those checks usually be? Mainly around what I said, labor law items like minimum pay, working standards. things like this. So this was not the most spicy part, obviously, but just to make sure we've got, let's say, the basics settled. Clarissa, if you look at these 6 dimensions, what do you consider the least and which one do you consider the most important for you?
I would say when it comes to the easier topics might be social security in most of the cases, simply because we can take care of this pretty easily, right? We know, so if we are aware of the travelers, we usually can apply for an A1 pretty easy. So at least within the EU, this is quite an easy thing. More complex topic, I would say, are taxes, just because the tax world is so complicated, especially when you are having several countries involved. Also, I guess in every company you have more senior people, so then it's even worse, right? This is what we understand. We always need to involve our tax colleagues in such tricky cases, even reach out to tax advisors. So this is quite complicated, I would say. And this is also where we need the most support from other teams as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
And
go ahead.
Yeah. What I just wanted to comment is also visa, maybe less risky than a tax topic, but still, we need to make sure that people are aware that maybe a visa is needed, and they need to be aware what kind of tasks they are allowed to do while working somewhere else. So this is something we also really want to make sure that our employees, they do have resources, so they better understand the immigration part as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Orsolya, interesting, because earlier this week we spoke, and I think you said exactly the same around visa, right? That it's out of these 6, it's not the one that that keeps you awake at night.
Yeah, but I mean, this is very much connected to the fact that we have like an internal solution that we have basically incorporated in our travel tool that the business travelers are supported with the appropriate visa and wherever they are going. So basically, therefore, this is not really a pain point for us at the moment. But I fully agree with Clarissa as well that, like, of course, the corporate tax topics or overall the tax topics, as well as the visa, could be very important and very risky areas. I think maybe in certain countries these EU PW notifications as well, depending like the activities. But I also have heard previously that France or Austria are some countries where they really investigate these registrations as well. So it might be also more important for an employer perspective to follow the rules there.
Yeah, very good. Interesting differentiation, right? A couple of tax and social security risks are they're rather high level and strategic, although for social security, but also PWD, they're also quite practical, right? If you've got an A1 or a COC, or you've done the registration, you're more or less done. What's your experience with registrations? Especially a couple of countries, you mentioned France, but also Switzerland, are quite known for, let's say, how harsh they are on this this matter.
I think it. So my experience is that it very much depends on the branch the company is in and the kind of activities the business travelers are doing on the business travel. So whether this is really just like going to a business meeting or whether they are working on a project, I think it makes a difference. But also also to make this understanding how the differences are between each and every country, as well the risk really is also in terms of like where our business travelers are really traveling most frequently. So what are the key destinations and how does it maps with the risk countries? So yeah, like in my experience, one of the like really known country is France, where like authorities really go out and to the company side, and they like to control and audit and investigate business travelers, and also like levy penalties, whether this is and mainly on the A1 or on the EUPW. So this is something which we in the past very much like focused on, that even if we didn't have like all EU countries covered from an EUPW perspective, but we were focusing on at least on the risk countries.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks very much. All right, so time to jump into the first example, maybe in the chat. So a reminder to post any questions that you may have. If anyone has, let's say, experience or insider knowledge on any of these cases, so it's Infosys in the US, right? Netflix in India, and Bosch in Italy. Please raise your hand. Very interesting. Obviously, I think the three of us were not involved, thankfully, to a certain extent. But very interesting cases. If you've never heard of them, please also just let us know. How this goes down is I quickly introduce each case, and then we have a short discussion. Hopefully, any questions will pop up. And that's how we try to basically search for, well, what are the true costs of business travel? Because you can spend money on tickets, you can spend money on a hotel, you can spend money on daily allowances. You don't want to spend money, especially not the money that we're looking at here, right, on penalties. So what happened here? Infosys, for those of you who don't know, and I have to admit, I didn't know, it's a very large Indian company, IT outsourcing. They, back in the day, we're talking 2010, 11, 200 to 250,000 people employed worldwide. And many of them were also project workers in the US. So business travelers to the US doing local activities for Infosys clients over there. And then in the US, and I can quickly go to the next slide, you've got all types of visa. It's quite standard. We've got that in Europe too, and in most countries it's similar. You've got the B1 and the H1B visa. And what Infosys systematically did is obtain a so-called B1 visa instead of the H1B visa. There are a couple of differences between the two. The most relevant for Infosys probably was that you relatively easy get a B1 visa. It goes fast, it goes cheap. The number of B1 visa the US issues are unlimited. And all of this is different if you look at H1B visa, which are a little bit more focused on regular inbound travel to the US. So it takes a little bit longer to successfully apply for one. The chance that you successfully apply for it is also smaller, takes more money. And most important, the number of H1B visa, at least back in the day, I wouldn't know today, but they were limited to a certain number. Read numbers between 50,000 and 100,000 per year, but it could have also been per state. Doesn't really matter. The short story is B1 was much easier than H1B, and probably that's why Infosys took it the easy way, although officially they should have gone for a good number of H1B visa. So they were caught, even though only 0.02% of all of the Infosys working days in the US were covered by this wrong visa. So a very, very small portion of their presence in the US, so to say, was caused because of this wrong visa, but they were caught. And there were some severe penalties hanging over their head, and they actually got the biggest penalty ever for an immigration error in the US. So we're talking $34 million, around 30 million euros, a significant amount. I do have to add here that the word systematically is a nice way of putting that probably they were very much aware of the fact that they were cheating the system to a little bit. I think it's an example that shows nicely that, of course, you can give it a go. You can take it the easy way with business travel compliance, but things will hit the fan, and if they do, it will get very, very expensive. One thing to add, and then we open up the round for a little bit of feedback on this case, is that it just didn't stop here. It may sound like, oh, this is now, 12, 13 years ago? Not really. I think in 2019 still, Infosys received an additional state penalty for the same matter, because this was a federal settlement, but some states also took it upon themselves to basically proceed with litigation or proceed with negotiations. And there have been at least 2 state-specific settlements, one for more than 1 million and the other one in New York for $900,000, and that was in 2019. So this this really turned out very bad for Infosys on a very interesting risk dimension for business travel, because visa is not the most relevant, as we discussed already, and still it cost them so big time. So Clarissa, maybe a question to you. B1 visa, H1B visa, you already talked a little bit about we need to instruct employees to get the right, we give them the resources. What are your experiences here?
Yeah. So as I said, I think it's super important that the business traveler, him or herself, they do understand what they are allowed to do and not to do while being on a business trip. Just because it could be so easy to do something wrong, obviously, also in this case, right? Maybe not everyone of the business traveler was aware of this risk here. So what I think is just really good to have is some kind of guidance that you provide to your employees. So even though you say the responsibility is within the team, for example, and not with HR or with the global mobility team or external consultant, is that you at least get some, what we, for example, do provide is some step-by-step guides, so that we share links. We do really share all the tasks that need to be done in order to be allowed to work in the other country. So with this, we hope that our people are aware of the fact that they might need to do something. And even if they then see, well, no visa is needed, it's still good that they do understand what is allowed and what is not considered a business trip. To really avoid those fees for the company.
Yeah, thanks. So you don't request a visa yourself, I think, Orsolya. That's similar to your experience and what you generally see in the market, right? Would you also not request the H1B visa on behalf of the employee? That would lie with the employee, him or herself?
So basically, we have this embedded in our business travel tool, and when the employee initiates the business travel, then basically they can there is a pop-up window, and depending on the destination where they are going, they can select the necessary visa which is required, and of course they get in that tool the necessary information and guidance, depending on the activities which they are doing in the destination country, which is the proper visa to be applied for. So currently we are not involved in this process because this is absolutely managed by the external vendor, also via the tool.
Yeah, thanks. And I think also makes sense probably compared to Infosys, where you don't have a lot of project workers. It's quite a specific business.
Exactly. So I know that we only had very few cases where, it was also in the US, where cases were challenged, but it was mainly on the frequency and the number of days they were spending there. And then, of course, and we reviewed and we provided some external support, but it is not something. So we are quite relaxed on the immigration part. Let's put it that way.
You did say so. Some of them were challenged. That's a question that pops up quite often from our clients. Okay, so there's a risk, but how does it work? How does a risk materialize? Is that what you meant when they were challenged? Were they stopped at the border?
Yeah, they were stopped at the border, and basically the immigration officer was asking questions that why I think they were traveling with an EFTA, and that why it was not an H-1B visa, and basically we had to review the working pattern, the responsibilities, and also like the activities the employee was exercising based in the US. So basically we had to look into this more, and also to provide some legal immigration advice to these cases. But I mean, this was very few cases in our case.
Yeah, perfect.
And maybe just to add some personal experience, because I was on assignment to the US as well. And of course, I was going through the visa process in advance. But even if you then enter the US, there is a super strict check with you. They're really asking you detailed questions. So the US is pretty strict when it comes to allowing people to enter the country. Also, other countries do that, but yeah, I know this from the US how strict it is. Even if you just go there on vacation, they really want to ask you several questions. They are also not stupid. They do know that some people simply want to bring the work while being on vacation with them, just simply bring the laptop with them. So they are aware, and they do know how to ask those questions and get the answers they need.
And maybe one more thing to add, because many times I see these this push from the business, that and not having this awareness and understanding that visa or immigration takes time, so that they really want to move people or be in the certain destinations basically as of tomorrow. And of course, depending on the destination, it might take some time until you have the proper visa to travel to that destination. And so there is this conflicting situation that like there is a strong push from the business and very low awareness and understanding, whether we are now speaking about like the traditional mobility or moves or the business travels. But I think this is like a general problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think business travel compliance, we're talking about visa, corporate tax. It all starts with something much more fundamental, as if you don't know, you don't know, and can go dramatically wrong. Interesting, maybe also to what you said, Clarissa, is that, everybody knows the American ESTA, right? That even if you're not a business traveler, you just go on vacation, you need still something. You see movement, and that's maybe another reason why business travel compliance becomes more and more relevant. There's movement between authorities. Within the EU, there's actually a system, I think the abbreviation is ETIAS, more or less similar to the ESTA, is going to be introduced. It should have already been introduced, but they're introducing it, I think, later this year, probably early next year. So also for non-EU travelers traveling to the EU, they will always have to do some type of registration. It will not be difficult. Neither is a ESTA, but you'll have to do it. You have to do it up front. And of course, the simple fact is that if you do something like this, the authorities know that you're there, and it just shows there's increased scrutiny. If they know you're there, they can come and ask you questions. And usually if they come and ask you questions, although they make it sound nice, it's obviously not for a very good reason. They're looking for something. I see no questions yet. That's good. Maybe we answer them all in our stories, but if you feel free to share, okay? We go over to the next one, which is Netflix. Everybody knows Netflix, as I already said. So before we had a visa case where business travel for, it was around 10,000 travelers to the US turned out rather expensive, $34 million. The good news is this case is a little bit less expensive for Netflix. We're talking, you see the number of dollars here on screen, but that's not the actual amount that they're going to pay, because that's the profit that is allocated to the PE. And of course, the taxes are only going to be a portion of this. So the estimated, let's say, taxes due for this Netflix case are around $2 million. Well, what happened? Netflix has no presence in India, more or less no presence, only a couple of expats and a couple of business travelers. And one of those business travelers was actually stopped at the border, like Orsolya already mentioned, and questions were asked. Probably they made it sound very nice and sweet, but it wasn't so sweet after all, because at some point the Indian authorities now took the position that those expats and business travelers constituted a PE. in India. So they've constituted local presence of Netflix in India. And they're saying, well, when there's local presence, you're generating local profits. We would like a piece of the pie. Don't get me wrong, if I may sound, let's say, skeptical, I think it's totally fair that India does something like this. Netflix is making a lot of money all around the world, and they're paying taxes in probably maybe 1 or 2 countries. It's been a discussion in the tax world for years. Should we have some type of digital tax, yes or no? Well, India took it quite creatively. They've now said, well, who needs a digital tax if you have business travelers in my country? Because they have said, yeah, maybe the business travelers or the expats, they were doing little work in India, but looking at Netflix's presence here in India, a lot of Indians are also looking Netflix series. They've got subscriptions. And that's where things went wrong or went south here for Netflix, because usually you would say, well, maybe the profits allocated are like 10-20% of the salaries of the business travelers and the expats. That's not what happened here. They've now allocated, as you can see here, $6 to $7 million in profits to the PE, which is clearly the result of, we've looked at your local revenues here in India, and we're going to tax it. We don't have a digital tax in India, but we do have corporate tax. You have presence, so here's the bill. I see a question popping up in the meantime, but as I said, I'm a guy and there's a lot of text, so I've seen it. Thank you very much. Maybe quickly a question to either Clarissa or you, Orsolya. So I think with 2 million in corporate taxes, you're probably not done here. Clarissa, you've definitely already talked about engaging tax lawyers. And Orsolya, you also did it when in the US, I think you had a little bit of questions being asked. Can you maybe share some experience on how this usually goes down now that what's Netflix doing in India? What do you think?
I mean, regarding like for corporate tax, it is most of the time like an internal issue. So here we are very much exchanging with our group tax department, because it depends very much on the company structure, about the activities which we are doing. And of course, we also have India on our radar, because it's very well known as one of the most tax aggressive countries. So basically, this is for us like a big red light. And we have to be very cautious and like having a lot of exchanges on the structures on India. And because whether this is business travel or even in brackets vacation, so we really have to review whether and to which extent certain activities are allowed. So here, most of the time, there is a very active discussion and exchanges with the group tax department, as well as external consultants, tax consultants, to really understanding the risk and how to structure our travels and business activities so that this risk can be avoided.
Yeah, thanks. I think I can only confirm India is indeed one of the, let's say, worst, let's say, countries, or they're pretty strict on this. But yeah, I said already, I don't think it's an unfair position, because we can also turn it around. Netflix is probably a rather progressive company when it comes to paying taxes. Clarissa, I think in general, you're both at pharma, you're a little bit more conservative, right? What's your take on this?
Yeah, we are. I mean, obviously, we are in a sector, and we need in a specific life science sectors, and we also, due to COVID, got some. We are much more famous than we were before, I guess, in the last few years. And yeah, taxes is a big topic for us. I guess we are mostly aware of this famous Betriebsstättengründungsrisiko, so PE risk is everywhere, and we really take this serious. So this is also why we do also have internal tax teams, but if it gets too complicated, then we are in super close contact with external tax consultants, just to make sure that we don't create any PE in the other country. Even though we might even have an entity there, there is still a risk to create such a PE. So yeah, as I said, we really take this seriously.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback. And I think it already shows. Well, we are all tax lawyers, and we worked at EY, Deloitte, PwC, so we've been on the other side too. We know the fees they would invoice, and it kind of already shows the hidden costs of business travel. If it's worthwhile, prior to anything going wrong, engaging these lawyers just to make sure you're not doing anything wrong, that these hidden costs can be super high. So I've done a lot of math around it, but they're easily exceed 500 euros per trip. So then it's worth asking some specialists, because you just don't want this. And I think also for Netflix in India, to be honest, with these $2 million, they're just getting started. They're probably going to spend exactly the same amount in lawyers. Then they'll probably also have to pay wage tax and social security premium. So this is only the beginning for them. And by the way, once you have a PE, it's probably not so easy getting rid of it. So yeah, I think they'll have fun over there for a couple of years. Fun between brackets, obviously. So 2 questions, probably you've also seen them. Thank you very much, Paul and Herve. Both of them are on visa. Paul, the first one, of course, well, depending on the questions that people are being asked upon entry of the country, authorities might actually reject entry of the employee. Have you ever experienced this in practice, or what do you do to avoid this?
I mean, I haven't experienced that that our employees were rejected. There were questions were asked at the immigration. I mean, this is a very good question, how this can be avoided. Of course, the best would be that if they understand for what visa they have to apply for and what are the criteria, and like they can answer the questions, of course, so like a proper education, I would say. And whether then the employees are like applying for the visa, like there is a self-service, then I definitely would need that they really have to very throughout guided through the process, so that they can like make a self-assessment what kind of visa they have to apply for. And if this is basically outsourced to an external provider, then I mean, I would again assume that there is a proper data collection and information collection based on which the external provider can apply for the appropriate visa. So, and yeah, I agree with you that I mean it is not very that it is very likely if someone goes on a business trip, then of course it's not just like attending a conference for 2 weeks. He or she will definitely work as well. So yeah, I would definitely see that the education of the employees on the necessary visa, and also like understanding and to be able to answer these questions, and especially in the US, where we know that the immigration process is very strict.
And I also have good experience with reaching out to the embassy or to the visa center of that country. Maybe not if it's like super short notice, because of course they will take maybe a few days, maybe also 1 or 2 weeks. But if it's a well-planned business trip, it might still be worth reaching out to the embassy and ask the direct question, let them know what you're planning and whether a visa is needed, or just in the US, the ESTA, for example. And this is also what we did in the past for other companies when it comes to remote work. If we were not really 100% sure, they were always super helpful with the answers.
Yeah, very good point. We've done exactly the same at WorkFlex. We're starting with a workation product. You don't really know are they business travelers or not. We've reached out to more or less every government in the world, and they're human, so they respond, and that's really great. I think one other thing that I would recommend, Paul, is to make sure your people, of course, you need to have them informed, and also make sure they are somehow supported in answering these questions whenever they pop up immediately in a satisfactory way. So they should never, ever lie. but they should be prepared for receiving some questions and just being able to calmly answer. Because if it's at least my conviction and also experience, they might smell something's off, but if you immediately calm them down with the right answers, and then they'll let you go, and you've basically avoided a potentially pretty big issue here. By the way, very interesting fun fact here, 750 travelers rejected daily entering in the US. I've also heard this in practice, that people are just basically sent home. I've also heard much worse stories that people were individually banned for a couple of years. Very good. What kind of questions will they ask? Well, in the US, if you've ever traveled to the US, you might have seen these questions on the screen, but I think it pretty simply starts with, hello, welcome, what are you going to do here? And that's where the conversation starts. And things might go from, let's say, this to worse, asking for addresses, where you're going to work, things like this. So it's a wide variety. And this is just obviously only customs. Orsolya already mentioned in France, they are very eager to also visit company locations, flex offices, and also simply ask questions. And there it may start with, hello, can I see your ID? Just things like this. It starts very informal, is at least my experience.
And if I can add some comments here. So as I said, I was also, so I applied for a visa for the US, and I got some kind of visa training from my company before going to the interview. And they always told me that you should only answer the questions and not adding anything or give some more details. So you just need to wait for their question, you answer it, and then you just wait and see what the next question is. But stop giving them more information than what they were requesting. So I just listen to them, and then it will be okay in most of the cases.
Yeah, absolutely with you. It really starts with making sure your people are prepared, and you can only prepare your people, again, if you know. So make sure a process is in place that you, as responsible within the company, know what's happening. Only then you can react to it, because the business trip is going to take place. So much is clear, but you want to be involved so that you can steer and maybe escalate if necessary. So last case, I definitely want to spend time on this. That's why I urged to this, because we've got some interesting, let's say, experiences on board here. It's about Bosch. Similar to Netflix, they created a PE in Italy. It's actually project workers who were working for Fiat back in the day. I think we're talking 2010, 11, 12 also. And it's also relevant for your question, Hervé, because I think it's even on the next slide. There was an initial claim, not of 320 million euros. There was an initial claim from the Italian authorities of 1.4 billion euros in taxes for corporate tax, but also employment tax, social security, etc. So in full, we're talking about 1.4 billion euros, an incredible amount. And we're talking only 1,000 business travelers. Don't think this is something like insanely major. The amount is, the number of business travelers compared to the amount is still kind of overseeable. But there were also potential custodial sanctions threatening for the senior management. Custodial sanctions is basically a pretty way of saying jail time. So Bosch was very eager in settling this, but it did cost them quite significantly, because they agreed to pay 320 million euros in a settlement with the Italian authorities, which, by the way, they were not able to deduct in Germany. So it was really double tax, additional cost, not so great. While I read the questions, well, Orsolya, we've seen it before. You were at Bosch, not blaming. Can you share your experience on how this affected the company? You were not there at the exact same time, right? But this must have had an impact that you still remember.
I was working in Bosch after this incident happened, and basically it had a huge impact, I would say, to the whole organization. But I can also say that it is something which is, I think, well known, at least in many tax departments, because also my colleagues in other companies from the tax department always come, and this is the most frightened case whatever can happen to a company. So basically, and this penalty and the size of the penalty is so huge that this is like a case which is used as a memento for many other companies as well. But basically what happened in Bosch that time, that what is really important to really to understand what is a business trip and what is not a business trip. And back at that time we had a lot of project workers, or I mean they were not workers because we had a development center back in that time in Hungary, and our employees were traveling to certain projects to Germany. And basically the result or the consequence of this whole case was that even for like 2 weeks business trips or traveling to Germany to work on a project, or even one day, we had to basically set up a process that all these employees working on different projects in Germany get taxed, and there has to be a shadow payroll and double taxation and equalization of taxation, just to simply certain like very minimal number of days. So you can imagine the administration, the extra cost, the pain which all these which evolved, like that was really something huge. And that was only like from one country perspective. And basically after this court case, I would say that the whole Bosch organization was very much sensitive of establishing this PE for all these project type of works. So it had a huge impact and exposure.
Much more than the 320 million that we're looking at here. I fully agree. I think this also does not include any costs for lawyers and tax lawyers that they must have, let's say, engaged for this. But the increased scrutiny, I think the increased attention in-house is, of course, good, because the lack thereof might have been the reason of this problem. But also the increased scrutiny of authorities probably all around the world afterwards for Bosch must have also been very, very, let's say, real and not a great experience. Thanks for sharing that experience. Clarissa, well, you were at Bosch, you were at EY, and we chatted about it a little bit. It's just like all other big four, by the way. EY had its fair share of well, not call it a scandal, but issues. With the Wirecard, and that's when you were working there. Can you share a little bit of maybe a similar experience to what Orsolya just mentioned, how a compliance issue, this was not related to business travel for Wirecard then, but still, how it affects a business and its people?
Yeah. So I was working at EY when the Wirecard, even scandal, I would say, happened. I mean, they're still working on it, right? So it's an ongoing thing, and it will take a lot of years. And also, as you said, there is a reputation damage. And also, I mean, this was related to audit, so nothing that is really my topic, but still, we could feel that compliance is even a bigger topic then, because we wanted to avoid, of course, to even be more in the media. And we really want to also change or adapt and check the processes that we had internally in every kind of topic you can imagine. So we also felt this, even though we were far away from auditing. But yeah, this is something we could see an effect and changes within the company as well.
Yeah, thanks. I think the impact of such a, let's say, compliance risk materializing is absolutely not to be underestimated. So yeah, we're looking for the secret cost of business travel, a little bit of a detour when we're talking Wirecard, but it's basically, I think it should be clear, it doesn't weigh up to the upfront efforts that you can take. With only 5 minutes left, maybe both of you can spend 1 or 2 minutes, or Orsolya and Clarissa, on, well, how do you then, what do you recommend the audience to do to ensure this type of risks do not materialize? We've already talked a little bit about processes, informing. What are your basically 3 key recommendations of doing to make sure business travel is compliant?
I mean, I would definitely suggest to understand where the risk is in terms of like the business activities. So what is our company, like what kind of travel activities we are doing, and also what is our travel pattern in terms of destinations, and also like understanding where really the risk lies. I think this is absolutely like the first step to have a self-awareness and self-assessment. And then I think because that leads to the next step, like how we want to mitigate this. And I think this is like each and every company has a different approach. And basically whether they have a global solution, an IT tool which supports this process. Obviously, that is the best, I would say, but the most the easiest solution. But I think that is a very individual solution. But I would definitely say first to understand the company's behavior and the risk, and then to mitigate actions.
Clarissa, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you. So I think it's super important to review the current status and also to better understand what kind of business travel do we have? Do we have frequent traveler, senior people who are also traveling, to which country, what kind of country combinations we do have in the company. So really, understand the current status. I think this is super important. And then depending on your workforce and your business travelers, you should check what kind of service you would like to provide. Maybe it's even not that complicated. Maybe you already have a travel tool, then you maybe can combine it with a compliance tool. And then just see what options you have and implement it in the structure of your company.
Yeah, perfect. I couldn't agree more, I think. So it's, by the way, of course, also what we do at quickly talking through here, almost reaching the end. It's also what we try to help employers with, right? It's three things. You have to know what you're talking about. So you have to gather the information, connect to your booking system or something like this, whatever you need to do to be able to do the second step, and that is assess each trip. It's what Alexander also said in the chat. It's about what activities the individual is performing locally, and those activities differ for each business trip. So it's very important to assess. And then the last one is about indeed mitigation measures, obtaining A1s, obtaining COCs, doing PWD notifications. Mitigation may not have the sweetest sound to it, but I think everybody does it, and it's a total fair thing to do. It's a very important thing to do. So get the information, do the assessment, and then also mitigate the compliance risks are basically the three tools that we always recommend. And we happen to support employers with that. So if you want to learn more about this, then I recommend you to go to getworkflex.com. With 1 minute spare, I've got more than enough time to thank you, Orsolya, and thank you, Clarissa, very much for joining. There was a good number of attendees here. Very great also that you all joined. As I said, the slides will be shared. If you have any questions after this webinar, just please email them to me or send them on LinkedIn. Happy to answer or forward them to Orsolya and Clarissa. The recording should be available on Demio as well. Again, thank you very much, Orsolya, Clarissa, for sharing so openly your experiences. And then I wish every one of you a very happy rest of your Thursday. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.